Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, we'll be talking about Assassination. Primarily how it performs in Mythic Pluses, and hopefully after this video, more of you guys go and play yourself some Assassination. It's so fun right now. It's actually incredible, and if you're someone who was playing Assassination in, let's say, Battle for Azeroth, or always wanted to make Assassination work, right now is the perfect opportunity to become the early adopter and start getting really good at this spec. While in patch 9.05 did not bring a lot of changes for Assassination, it brought in key changes in order to smooth out the playstyle of this spec. So if you played it, let's say in Battle for Azeroth, where a lot of players quite enjoyed it, I think you're going to enjoy the updated version because it's very similar to the BFA version of the spec, minus the Azerite gear, of course. So with some of these changes, I wanted to kind of highlight Assassination for more of you guys to see how well the spec is performing and to have more of you guys give it a solid run. Let's go over the quick recap, the history lesson of Shadowlands Assassination. It started out in the gutter. It didn't really perform super well in comparison to Subtlety as well as Outlaw. And as we got into the expansion, started gearing our rogues, a lot of players realized that Subtlety has slight potential. Majority of this potential though is going to be towards Outlaw as the raid ready, dungeon ready PvE spec, and Assassination was heavily behind. While a favorite playstyle for a handful of players, it definitely was not a popular meta choice. A spec that's generally good for raiding, as it is so heavily focused on single target, you would imagine it would be amazing at downing bosses. However, with the way that the fights are set up in Castlanathria, there's quite a lot of cleave, which becomes naturally good for specs like Outlaw, but even in pure single target fights, Assassination simply could not hold a candle to the other specs. And a lot has changed since 9.05. Take a look at the logs themselves. There's an Assassination quickly climbing towards the top DPS ladders for a lot of these single target boss fights. Now, there are some cheesy things going on over on the logs, like players getting 5 power infusions and 3 benevolent fairies, which give you cooldown reduction, so even more vendettas. However, real Assassination rogues are still able to cut through the cheese and are able to show their prowess, as their numbers themselves are starting to gain headway over the Outlaw rogue. I think it is expected that a lot of Assassination rogues are going to be seeing themselves at the top of the damage meter, not just against rogues, but against other classes as well, as more players gravitate towards the spec, gravitate towards whatever covenants they want to play, and get the appropriate gear in order to min-max the potential. We're seeing a lot of Assassination perform well inside of raids, but not a lot of players are talking about the dungeons, which has been a very enjoyable experience, and that's what I primarily want to hit up in this video. From my time with Assassination Dungeon so far, I found myself gravitating towards the crit Lego. It makes the Vendetta window super strong, but also synergizes pretty well in AoE. But there are other legendaries for us to explore. Doomblade got buffed, so now it does some good shredding single target damage, used in raids, but can also be used in dungeons. And with the other changes in 9.05, I feel like there's a lot more potential for other legendaries like Zaldic with the bleed damage for executes to be more of a prominent legendary going forward. Another thing I noticed is the spec plays a lot smoother now, since some of the changes to offset the energy regen. Prior to this, you had to have a ridiculous amount of haste, but since then, Blizzard offset some of that energy regen to already existing passives. So I was able to get my rogue that's mostly set for Outlaw with crit versatility gear and hop on as Assassination and actually perform quite well. Another thing I noticed with the spec is the focus playstyle in Mythic Pluses is so good. Every single dungeon is going to have that powerful add or a boss that needs to be taken down ASAP, and this spec ends up bringing that single target damage that's quite unique, so you are bringing a unique experience and a unique damage profile to the table. And it also doesn't have that bad of AoE. Now, Outlaw is the dominant one when it comes to AoE damage, and you're not going to be like a Fire Mage or an Unholy Death Knight with the amount of AoE they put up, but very solid AoE regardless. Now for this video, I do have a couple pointers because I feel like doing AoE damage inside of dungeons for Assassination rogues can sometimes be awkward. We all know exactly how to do it on single target, continue bleeds, put up your Vendetta, throw Shiv into a bunch of Envenoms, but how does that translate into AoE? And what I learned is every opener, I'll just put up Garrote on every enemy that's nearby. So whether it's a boss, whether it's 2 enemies, 3 enemies, I'll always put up the Garrotes, and I usually follow it up with a Crimson Tempest. Every single opener, it doesn't matter what enemy I'm attacking. From there, you can continue on to either using Phantom Knives to build common points, since you'll have a lot of enemies to hit. That's a lot of common points. Common points need finishers, and that's where you can put up a bunch of Ruptures, replacing those Garrotes with Ruptures. However, if you do have big targets, after you have all your dots up and running, you triple Garrote with Crimson Tempest, you can build some common points, shiv the biggest guy in the group, go into Envenom. Build common points with Phantom Knives, you'll generate common points very quickly for another Envenom, and this will give you that punchy damage into whatever target you decide to focus on. If you already have a Slice and Dice rolling, Envenoms will allow you to maintain your Slice and Dice easier. This way you don't need to keep constantly refreshing Slice and Dice with every single trash pack. Just being able to throw out an Envenom from time to time inside of an AoE situation gives you that refresh of Slice as you move on from group to group. When doing my research, another question that I have myself is, how do you maximize Shiv? And what can you do with Shiv in order to get the most amount of value from it? Since we are running a Mythic Plus build, there are actually a couple different rotations you can do for a single target. Shiv is a pretty big button. It lets you do quite a lot of damage to the enemy and can also be used to slow enemies with crippling poison or de-enrage with numbing. As an assassination rogue, in dungeons, I felt like I wasn't really trying super hard to play into Shiv de-enrage window. Maybe in really high-end keys, but it's a pretty big component of your burst damage, so for the most part it's my own button, and I'll use it however I please, unless I can somehow try to line it up against certain mechanics. But as assassination, one thing I found out is it's good to maintain your dots and Slice and Dice. Outside of your dots and slice, you kind of want to go for Shiv windows quite often. You want to have some common points ready, 3 or 4 available, into a Shiv, and go for as many Envenoms during that window as you can. With higher haste values, I could probably go for 3 Envenoms back to back before having to refresh all of my dots again, as Corrode and Rupture will be falling off shortly, but that's kind of what you end up doing as a sass. Outside of that, do you press Envenom? Not really. Apparently it's actually better in Mythic Pluses to press Crimson Tempest. It'll do slightly more damage than in Envenom, however Envenom is a nature hit that will have more benefits instead of Shiv. Outside of that, that's some of the research that I've had in the past when it comes to the spec, trying to sim my way through some of the best rotations that will maximize the value of my damage, and in my research I felt like sharing this information with you guys, stuff that I learned. Hopefully you guys will find it helpful and maybe even easier of approaching your rogue when it comes to maximizing the damage against a singular enemy inside of a dungeon, or maybe even a trash pack or 2. So what are the advantages of playing Assassination over, let's say, something like Outlaw? Because I feel like a lot of you guys are looking for maybe alternatives in order to play some of the different specs, or maybe even just try something new. I feel like with this spec, you don't have to worry about Roll the Bones. Quite a lot of you guys play Roll the Bones, and some of you like it, and some of you don't. If you're not a huge fan of Roll the Bones, I would say Assassination is a decent alternative for many of you guys to get your keys done for the week. Maybe even get some decent pushes out of it. You do have limited mobility with the spec in comparison to Outlaw, and the constant grapple hooks that it can do, as well as the shorter sprint window since of all the cooldown reduction elements of that spec. However, Shadow Step is a nice, snappy mobility ability that lets you get out of harm's way in a quick second, if you use it masterfully. Corrode is an incredibly useful tool against many enemies inside of dungeons, especially those that are casters. Your tanks will definitely thank you. Vendetta and Vanish 100% crit window was super effective, but I do wonder how much better Doomblade might feel, and I definitely want to give that a go as soon as I make that legendary. You also have a very nice balance with this spec, currently in Mythic Plus dungeons, of bleeds as well as poisons. Every ability has a usage. Shiv gives you big Envenoms. Outside of that, it's all about the bleeds, baby. And it feels so good to play because it makes you feel like every ability you press has a purpose, it has a usefulness. So it definitely gives you a slightly different feeling that's not a hodgepodge of abilities, but rather everything has a purpose inside of the Mythic Plus, and it's super fun to play to that purpose. It's hard to say if Assassination is going to completely take over Outlaw in terms of Mythic Pluses, because Outlaw has been great for pushing high keys, great AoE damage with not too much sacrifice on single target, great mobility, as well as great utility with all the different CC you have, like extra gouge in order to interrupt certain casts. I feel like this spec, however, is a great alternative for many of you guys that are just not too fond of Outlaw and Mythic Pluses, and should definitely give it a go next time you're trying to get your keys done for the week. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Like, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this and more content about Assassination rogues. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Go out, play some Assassination, and let me know how it felt. And I'll see all of you in another video.